Malafarina has is white creatures, you know, Chris can just sit there and draw back into the game.
Right.
And this is we are underway. It was experiment 1 on turn 1 for Malafarina. The challenge here for Chris will be to see if he gets to play Magic. No second land for him on his 4-card hand. He does have a fair amount of removal, Mizium Mortars and Dreadbore, but right now, nothing else joins the table, and Malafarina not wanting to give Chris much time at all.
This would have been one of the types of draws that would have been hard for Chris to beat on 7 cards. So on 4, it is pretty much hopeless.
Yeah, experiment 1, Voice of Resurgence, Centaur. Chris is down to 13. And right now, Chris staring down 8 power. That is going to take game 1. And Chris on a multiple kept, I think, actually a somewhat decent hand here. It was a hand that had enough removal that if he hit his lands, he could bridge the gap to maybe some of his more expensive cards. It's a fine keep on 4. It has, of course, has its weaknesses, and this time it didn't pan out.
When you're down to 4 cards, you can't have it all. So a hand with at least some upside to become a functional draw is fine to keep there, but didn't pan out for Chris naturally.
All right, so for those of you joining us here, this is our Top 8 Sunday, which means we are going to be giving away loads of Star City Games Premium over the course of the day. Generally, whenever we cover a Top 8, we give away Star City Games Premium, but between every match of that Top 8, or every round, that is. So what'll happen is during the Top 8, we will ask you a question after game 1 of our first Top 8 match, and if you believe you know the answer, send us a tweet with that answer. Make sure it has the hashtag SCG Premium on it, and at the end of the round, we'll randomly pick one of the correct answers and award 3 months of Star City Games Premium for the top 8, 6 for the top 4, and a full year during the finals. And this is 3 top 8s today, so that's 9 chances to win Star City Games Premium.
Yeah, and the question that I have for you, and again, tweet your answer at SCG Live, hashtag SCG Premium. We had a 5th player lock up a spot in the Players' Championship yesterday based on his performance in the Invitational. Name that player. Again, tweet your answer at SCG Live, hashtag SCG Premium. And of the correct responses, one will be selected for 3 free months of Star City Games Premium content.
Yeah, we're going to lock up a 6th player today, but we're looking for the Season 3 points leader. And that was how that spot was locked up. So, with that said, let's go ahead and go back to this match. We haven't, you know, we're kind of still in that pregame spot where we haven't really seen this match play out. We're not going to get to see any other pre-board games, however. The last 1 or 2 will be post-board. And normally a mid-range deck, sideboard's much better than an aggro deck. And I would think that this continues to be true.
That's one of the charms of playing Jund strategies, either monsters or planeswalkers, is that your sideboard games usually get much better. This should be the same for Chris. 2 copies of Righteous Returns, a Mizium Mortars, 2 Flames of the Firebrand, a Vraska the Unseen, a Bow of Nylea, an Ultimate Price, a Putrefy, a Magma Spray, 2 Golgari Charms, and 3 copies of Mishkar Hydra. All the removal spells here are going to be powerful, or at least the ones that catch everything. The Putrefy, the Ultimate Price, maybe even going so far as to go to Vraska, although that's a little bit expensive. The Mizium Mortars. To me, the question is, does he want to go to a secondary removal spell? There's some cards he has, like Flames of the Firebrand and Magma Spray, which are good against certain classes of David's cards and not very good against others.
Right.
I don't know if Chris is going to want to go that far, but things like the Putrefy, the Ultimate Price, the Mizium Mortars, those are absolutely coming in.
So a lot of times with Jund strategies, you'll see post-board that they have, quote-unquote, you know, an all-kill spells board plan. And it seems like this is, you know, against creature decks, usually you just see Jund players become this all-kill spell deck with some sort of source of card advantage. I'd expect Chris to do it, but I'm a little wary of that plan because he doesn't have Courser of Crewfix. You know, when you're doing the all-kill spell plan, you usually want to kill everything and sit back behind some source of card advantage. Can Rabblemaster fill that role?
Not necessarily, but Storm Breath Dragon can, and so can Pelucranos. Those are cards that can invalidate, you know, David's entire board with enough setup from Chris. If Chris goes removal spell into Pelucranos or Storm Breath Dragon, that doesn't really matter if he's drawing any additional cards. That's probably enough to stabilize the game.
All right, on the other side, David Malafarina has a lot of his board devoted, it looks like, to mono blue style strategies or burn style strategies. These cards like Skylasher and Unflinching Courage in here. Those won't be particularly relevant here. The questions would be, the only cards I want to look at would be Banishing Light or Ajani Steadfast. Are either of those good enough to warrant boarding?
I think it's fine for David to bring in the 3rd and 4th copies of Banishing Light. He has 2 in his main deck if he's feeling so inclined. I think that if I was in his spot, I would strongly consider sideboarding nothing. But if he wants to bring in the Banishing Lights, I can understand that.
So Johnny Steadfast didn't come up on your radar here. This is one of the newer cards. It's from M15. My question to you would be then, what kind of matchup do you want a Johnny Steadfast for?
I think other small creature matchups where the board is going to get built up, I think it's probably fine against a deck like Mono Red because the lifelink power is really good there as well. But
Sure.
if Chris is executing his game plan, he's probably going to have a board and be casting a lot of removal spells, and a Johnny Steadfast just isn't very powerful in that sort of game.
Yeah, if Chris is killing everything, David will just need more creatures. And we start out game 2. You see here some of those all-kill spells. Some of those kill spells have been boarded in. It looks like Magma Spray in Chris's opener, along with Domery Rod and a lot of lands. He is tanking on a Temple of Abandon.
Another interesting feature of Chris's deck is a full playset of Domries, which used to be just the standard. Players have been moving away and away from that card, but Chris still on 4.
Yeah, he was a 4-of in the original red-green monsters list. I don't want to say Chris is playing red-green monsters, but it looks like he's going back to that blueprint a lot more than we've seen players do.
Yeah, this is sort of a more classic take on the deck for sure.
Yeah, Malafarina has one of his 2 Sunblade Elves on turn 1, where that guy's generally a good bet to be a 2-2 on turn 1. But Chris does have a Magma Spray, so we'll see if this guy gets to live very long.
I would imagine that Chris's game plan here is just to kill everything on curve as much as he can and try to get to his 4 and 5 mana cards.
So if you're Chris, you would kill the elf. Would you wait to see if David's going to play a Voice of Resurgence? That's, Voice is probably the premium target in David's deck for Magma Spray.
I think that I probably would have killed it straight away if I had a Magma Spray because of the threat of Selesnya Charm if David gets to untap. The fact that nothing happened there indicates to me that maybe, okay, he is saving it for a Voice of
opted
Resurgence.
to take 2. I think once he saw the Voice come down there, then he was thinking, okay, well, for only 2 life, I can actually just get the Voice.
I just don't even know how much better the Voice of Resurgence is than a Sunblade Elf in this matchup.
Sure.
Voice does not seem very high on the list of cards that Chris has to worry about out of David's deck.
So we see the Magma Spray turn 2 for VanMeter. He's going to play an Overgrown Tomb tapped and just pass back. Looks like he's content to take 2 more off Sunblade Elf for now and just deal with Malafarina's threats as they come. Turn 3 Mana Confluence for David Malafarina, and he's going to fill up the board pretty quick here. We see Experiment 1, and it looks like a replacement Voice of Resurgence.
Another very good draw here thus far for David.
A trio of 2/2s, and at least the other 2 can be difficult to deal with. Experiment 1 has the ability to regenerate. Voice of Resurgence makes that token when it dies. We'll see how Chris gets rid of all of these. He's going to play Pelucranos World Eater right now.
And this is a very good spot for Banishing Light if David has it.
And right on call, Banishing Light takes care of Chris's only blocker, and 3 attacks put Chris down to 8. And he's got to be worried about just getting aggroed out here.
This is the problem with the matchup here is, look at Chris's curve here. Come to play tap land on turn 1. Magma Spray you on turn 2. Turn 3, he just hasn't caught up. I mean, David's just casting stuff on time here. And the first couple turns of the game, Chris's deck just isn't very efficient. Look at his hand now. There's no shortage of power. It's just, is he going to have enough time to deploy everything?
Yeah, well, we see him start with a Golgari Charm. That's going to get him his Pelucranos back, and then we'll cast Domri Rad. I believe he's just going to fight right away with it.
He needs to stabilize the board as soon as he possibly can.
Yeah, he doesn't want Malafarina just casting a second Banishing Light and putting him to 2. Or actually, it'd be 1 here. Chris had to use Mana Confluence to play all those spells. Pelucranos eats an Experiment 1. Chris at 7. If he untaps with 5 mana, he can use Pelucranos to eat another creature.
Although that is another point of damage.
It's another point of damage. And actually, if David just leaves up 5 mana, that doesn't work thanks to Sunblade Elf's activated ability.
And I believe that David has Advent in his hand, so he can pass with 5 mana up. Chris will hypothetically do something else with his turn, because as you mentioned, Pelucranos can't fight anything. And then David can end a turn Advent, and that might be enough to close the game out.
Certainly if he has another spell like a Banisher Priest or a Banishing Light, that would be great.
Yep. Now, most likely, I think if David's walking away from the table and asking anything, I don't think he has something like Banishing Light, something straightforward to resolve this board. But he is ahead for now, but Chris starting to make some inroads to stabilize this game. It's going to be hairy, but he does have a shot now. But you are seeing kind of a case in point of why I don't like this matchup very much on the Jund Monster side here, is even Chris having a very good draw on the play, his deck just doesn't match up very well for the first 3 or 4 turns.
Well, he's just having to dodge a lot of David's draws. Say David had a Selesnya Charm there. That would almost win the game right there, and there's not much Chris can do about it.
Correct.
Draw for the turn. Chris pluses the Domri. Just gets another counter. Looks like his remaining cards, he has a pair of lands and a Vraska. So he can choose to Monstrous, leave up 5 to threaten Monstrous-ing Pelucranos. If he doesn't, just passes back, then if David tries to tap out for anything, Chris will just eat a creature.
And this is the problem that Chris is in, and this comes up all the time when you're playing against green-white aggro. Is David flooding out right now, or is he casting Advent? If he's flooding out, then Chris probably would like to cast his Vraska this turn, for example. If he has Advent, I think Chris would much rather hold up his mana, be able to fight, say, the Sunblade Elf, if David goes and makes a move.
And he's going to pass, and this is exactly what you mentioned. Advent of the Worm is cast in response to that. Pelucranos is going to fight the Sunblade Elf, becomes monstrous, and Chris looks like he's in a fine spot. Well, a little bit of a tenuous spot. He is at 7, and David has 7 power on the board. But Chris does have the largest creature, so right now Malafarina does not have good attacks.
Yeah. And at least one of the 2 cards in David's hand appears to be a Plains, which is good news for Chris.
Yeah. Both Banishing Light and Selesnya Charm would be game-winning right now.
I think we would have seen him by now.
It looks like that other card in his hand is Cetessan Tactics.
Cetessan Tactics is, to me, a little dodgy in this matchup, but could still come up in this game. Unfortunately, I think Chris is executing his game plan, which is just play a bunch of removal spells, stabilize the game with something large, and Cetessan Tactics does not line up very well in that sort of game. Look at his hand, too. It's another Domri, a Dreadbore, a Vraska, just all removal.
Yeah, and we'll see him on that Dreadbore draw. He's going to go ahead and take care of the Worm token. He knows that Malafarina didn't currently have a Selesnya Charm or Banishing Light, so he wants to take care of the creatures before Malafarina draws one. Once he gets all these creatures, or like just the amount of power on Malafarina's side of the board down below 7, he will feel a lot safer in doing things like casting Vraska or plussing Domri. And in response to Dreadbore, Malafarina is going to strive this Cetessan Tactics. It's a big 2-for-1 he's willing to put himself to.
The thing is, this Cetessan Tactics is not getting any better, which is kind of why his hand's forced.
Right, he's going to have both creatures fight Pelucranos, which means both his creatures die. He does get to keep an elemental token, but right now it's just a 1/1 as it's his only creature. Domri pluses, and Chris casts Elvish Mystic.
And that's a big draw there for Chris. It puts a lot of pressure on David to find a creature this turn to be able to make any sort of attack.
Right. Luxodon Smiter is the draw, so he does have a 2/2 elemental. So he's going to get to attack. We'll see where it goes. Is it at Chris? Is it at Domri? It looks like it's at Chris. He drops to 5. Looks like Chris is edging closer to turning a corner here. And he's going to use Vraska to kill the Smiter. And I would not be surprised if Domri's just going to make these last 2 creatures trade.
Yeah, Chris has a lot of power in play between Domri and Vraska. It's just about stabilizing this game. And even though that fight doesn't look great, Chris just doesn't want to take any more damage.
Yep, David now with no creatures. He's gotten Chris down to 5, but he's staring down a pair of Planeswalkers. That's Domri, Rad, and Vraska. David's draw for the turn was Banishing Light, a draw that a few turns ago would have been match point, but right now all it does is takes care of a Vraska as Chris slowly draws his way into more cards with Domri, and here is Gore Clan Rampager. Now to be outclassed. David will play his own 4/4, so play Smiter, so the 4/4s square off against each other, but it doesn't look like David can push damage yet. See, Chris's hand is another land and another Domri.
And David's not going to be blocking here. He's getting out-carded here, so he needs to try to squeeze out the last couple of points as much as possible. Can't really trade.
Chris willing to 2-for-1 himself. Domri, his first Domri goes to 0 to cause those two creatures to fight. And then he plays their replacement Domri out of his hand, and that reveals a big one in Stormbreath Dragon.
Chris has done a really excellent job of executing his game plan in this game.
Well, one thing I like about how he's played it is that it seems like he's giving enough respect to Malafarina's creatures. A lot of times when you see a player ahead, you will see them kind of ignore the creatures as they build up card advantage. Chris has been willing to sacrifice card advantage to just continue playing a kill spell whenever possible. You see they're like sacrificing his Domri just to make two creatures trade.
As long as Chris has enough time, he'll probably be able to leverage his superior cards. His fight is against time.
And land number 8 is for the turn is there. His only card is Stormbreath Dragon. But remember, green-red aggro has very few ways to get through a Stormbreath Dragon.
Although Chris is at the magical, 5 life points here. So if David draws Advent and Chris has no blockers on the way back, that could be game. Though Chris just drew a Putrefy, and that might lock this game up.
Yeah, with 8 mana, Chris can cast Stormbreath Dragon. He can hold up Putrefy just in case something like Advent happens. And this should take it home. He draws an Elvish Mystic off Domri, plays Stormbreath, and swings for 4.
And Chris, understanding that Advent is David's way to get out of this game, not casting the Elvish Mystic here, just holding on Putrefy.
And now Malafarina's hand is empty again. His last cards were an additional land and an Experiment 1. More lands for Chris. He's just sitting back on that Putrefy and Elvish Mystic. But this should be good enough. And look at just using so much removal here. He plays Elvish Mystic and uses Domri to have it fight that Experiment 1 on the spot. And then he swings Stormbreath Dragon.
Yeah, he has Putrefy in hand and access to a monstrous Stormbreath Dragon next turn, and that's going to get it done.
Yep. Malafarina's last draw is Policeman Lion, a card that's pretty good here, but Chris with 7 mana can simply monstrous Stormbreath Dragon. He sees no cards in Malafarina's hand, knows that the coast is clear for a lethal swing, and we are on to game 3.
And there you saw it. Chris's hand that game had no mana acceleration either, but the removal spells allowing him to get to Planeswalkers, not all those trades are the most efficient thing. There was a lot of 2-for-1s on Chris's side of the table, but was able to keep his life total just high enough, stabilize the game, and then Stormbreath Dragon can carry the day from there pretty easily.
Yeah, going back to the board, looking at the options they had, Chris decided to board in Golgari Charms in this matchup. He had a lot of value as he hit a Banishing Light with one of them, but what other value can he get off them outside of getting rid of Banishing Lights?
Experiment 1. Soldier of the Pantheon. Those are a couple creatures that do get swept up. Although who knows if Soldier of the Pantheon is even in David's deck post-board. And I could see the -1/-1 effect, even if David doesn't have any of his one-type creatures. The board's just getting built up on both sides, and Golgari Charm being very powerful in combat.
All right, can use that. We did see Magma Spray come in out of the board. We saw Putrefy. So these are some of the things that Chris has sided in. Have to think Mizium Mortars is in as well. Talk through Bow of Nylea. This is a card we've seen in a lot of sideboards. I don't see it on too many game states. I know it's good against the small aggro decks, like your mono reds and mono blacks. Against a more green, mid-range aggro deck, is it still good?
I don't think it's as good. I think that the game isn't really about gaining life because David, when he's winning, he's hitting in huge chunks. It's not like against mono red or mono black where you're getting hit with a couple 2/1s, they're trying to push through the last couple of damage, and gaining 3 every turn is wiping away their attacks. When David's doing his thing, he's hitting for 7 or for 9, and Bow just doesn't really make sense in those kind of games.
Yeah, and maybe a way to think about it is, right, the mono black and mono red decks are really good at dealing 20, but dealing 30 can be pretty challenging to them. A green red aggro deck, once it starts winning, can really just continue to deal damage.
Correct. And especially now that you've seen, all these Banishing Lights out of David's deck too. If you were uncertain about Bow before, it seems not like a card you can really bring in here.
So as these players shuffle up for Game 3, we're going to give you a quick report on our backup match. That is between Jarvis Yu and Patrick Guardiano. Those players, also at 1-1 split, are shuffling up right now for Game 3. Remember, Jarvis is on Black-Green Devotion, whereas Patrick Guardiano is playing Red-White Burn.
I talked to Jarvis a little bit yesterday, and even though the Burn matchup is historically something pretty scary for Mono Black Devotion, he beat 2 copies of the deck during the Swiss rounds and felt pretty comfortable about his matchup.
Yeah, so Burn was a deck that, like I said, I think when it initially came out, it took some Mono Red players by surprise. But Mono Red has, or sorry, not Mono Red, Mono Black players by surprise. But it seems like Mono Black has adapted back to make this an acceptable matchup.
They control the tools if they want to make the matchup good or bad. If you don't cap out on duresses, you know, whether if you're playing Lifebane Zombie instead of Nightveil Spectre, you're going to have a really rough matchup. But you do have the option of playing. Step 1 is, do you have Nightveil Spectre and 4 duresses in the sideboard? That's sort of the industry standard level of Black Devotion, where your matchup will be acceptable, but still probably a little bit south of 50%. Past that, you have cards like Freakish Cure, which can make the matchup solidly in your favor, and Freakish Cure does work in other matchups. Past that, you have cards like Staff of the Death Magus, which really don't have a role anywhere else, but make your Burn matchup pretty close to unlosable if they come up. So Black Devotion can tailor how much of a response they want to make for that deck. To me, the tier 1 is just, the baseline is 4 duresses and you're playing Nightveil Spectre instead of Lifebane Zombie. If you don't have that going on, your matchup's probably really bad. And then beyond that, it goes from, you know, bad but not horrible to actively good, depending on the sideboard slots.
Yeah, Staff of the Death Magus, that is one of those narrow cards that we did see a lot of the Japanese players first adopt into the deck, but it's become something that in the right metagame, a lot of the Black Mages have turned to help shore up this matchup. The card is very difficult for any bird deck to beat. All right, looking at the rest of our bracket, number 1 seed Scott Metcalf playing green-white aggro defeated the number 8 Michael Samet. So Scott moves on to the semifinals. He will play the winner of this matchup. So if VanMeter wants to make the finals, he'll have to go through a pair of green-white aggros. If Malafarina wins this match, we'll have a green-white aggro mirror in the top 4. So we have a 2-0 there. We will bring you the other match in just a second on an update on that. Yeah, okay, and then we have Peter Rep with Mono Black Devotion, 2-0, actually defeating Richard Panda to Win's Mono Black aggro deck.
Pretty big upset there.
I mean, it's as much of an upset as you can say, right? One of the real pleasures to playing a deck like Mono Black is that even your bad matchups are only 40%.
Yeah, it's hard for you to have a real fail state because you have so much disruption and removal that if your opponent draws just slightly too many lands, let's say, your matchup is probably good no matter what.
Right, I mean, that's one of the advantages to playing a deck that's just powerful, that is powerful in its own game plan, you know, not really meta to beat anything, it's just real strong, is that generally you don't have any foils.
Right.
You're underway. This is Game 3 between Malafarina and Chris VanMeter. David's going to go ahead and throw out an Experiment 1 on turn 1. Chris just has a tap land, and as you said, the play is important, and as we kind of saw in Game 1, forgetting it for a second that Chris was on 4 cards, some of David's draws can just never give Chris a chance.
Though this has got to be a big sigh of relief here for Chris. First of all, David uses Celestia Charm, and Celestia Charm is really good at answering Pelucranos, of course. Secondly, this is not Fleece Main Line. This is not Call the Conclave. So Chris not under the same level of pressure as he was in the first game, or even the second game thus far.
Chris shocks to 16, and here come the kill spells. The first one is Dreadbore. It's going to take out Experiment 1. Have to think it's not the last one. We'll see how many he gets to fire off. Malafarina, land number 3 is Mana Confluence, and it's going to be a Johnny Caller of the Pride, making that Reed Duke token into a 3-3 and dropping VanMeter down to 13.
This is the test here. Chris has a removal spell. He's definitely seized the tempo of the game, and if not, he's going to fall really far behind.
Question for you. Malafarina that turn had the option between a Johnny Caller of the Pride and Voice of Resurgence. A Johnny early is great because it lets you get extra value out of the Planeswalker, but it does give rise to situations like this where Chris actually managed to clear the board of creatures with Mizium Mortars.
Exactly. Now Chris has Broken Serve. I think that I would prefer to see Voice last turn for the reasons that you said.
Yeah, well, the problem I know is Malafarina, this turn he dealt 0.
Yeah.
And you see his play was that Voice, and he did make it into a 3-3. Very possible that Chris, unless Chris has something like Pelucranos or something big to block, that he'll be taking some more damage this next turn.
Now, what is the upside of David's line of play here is it's pretty strong against Magma Spray. Chris has not gotten an opportunity to use that yet.
Chris will shock again down to 11, and as mentioned, Pelucranos World Eater was the play. He still has to watch out though. Remember, Ajani Call of the Pride has that flying and double strike ability on it. Right now, that threatens to put Chris to 5. Remember, it's a -3, so he can do it 2 turns in a row. And that may just be his game plan. First one swings, that'll be 6, putting Chris down to 5.
And 5, again, that's the magical number.
Now Advent of the Worm is just terrifying.
Chris has to respect it now.
Can Chris deal with just another flying Voice? We will see here. Does not have enough mana to have Pelucranos eat the Voice of Resurgence. If he had a Magma Spray, Pelucranos could work in tandem with Voice. With Pelucranos to eat the Voice. He could go 2 and 1. His hand, Elvish Mystic. Gorklan Rampager.
I will say that David's
threats.
body language right now, when he has 2 lands in play and 4 mana up, is a lot different than when he actually did have the Advent in his hand with 4 mana up.
Body language on that play, the minus play, didn't seem like, oh, I got you now, minus my Ajani. It did seem more like, well, this is my only play, minus Ajani.
Yeah.
Pelucranos will take away that line. It's going to actually turn sideways, take out Ajani Call of the Pride. And he has some options with blockers. Gorklan Rampager is the card he's moved to the front of his hand. Certainly not a bad option in taking down a 3-3. But he's got to worry if he does that if Malafarina just has another Ajani, this match is over. Chris contemplating here. It looks like, can he go for Elvish Mystic and leave up mana? That will remain to be seen. In our backup feature match, that one has finished. Jarvis Yu has taken game 3, so his Black-Green Devotion will go on to the semifinals to play against Peter Rep. He defeated Patrick Guardiano and Red-White Burn. So on the bottom side of the bracket, we have Black-Green Devotion versus Mono-Black Devotion, a tried and true matchup of the meta.
Well, looks like Chris's hand is a little unwieldy here. He doesn't have that much in the way of ability to chain together multiple spells here. He can really only hold up Golgari Charm.
Elvish Mystic. The draw, a swing by Malafarina. Will Chris just chump? Possibly.
It would be weird if he chumped when he had the option of casting a Rampager.
And he is putting the elf in blocking mode. And he probably won't be playing anything this turn because his opponent has a Voice of Resurgence.
If Chris is chump blocking here, I feel like he almost has to use the Golgari Charm to regenerate. I'm not sure what the line of play is if that's not what's happening here.
And it's just a chump. I mean, it's possible that Chris is waiting to try to hit 5 mana. We'll see. Malafarina adds Sunblade off to the board. Chris missed land number 5 last turn, and yeah, Elvish Mystic was it. That was his only play.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of with you. I don't think that line is terrible, but I do wonder if that is Gorklan Rampager he has. I guess I need to quantify there. If he does have a 4-drop, I'm surprised he didn't play it.
I guess what the merit of that line of play is that it does allow Chris to survive if David has an Advent there at the end of the turn. Because he gets to chump block the Voice and Golgari Charm to -1/-1. But that's triggering the Voice.
Well, but the Voice is a 3/3.
I'm saying he can chump block the Voice and then Golgari Charm to shrink the Worm down to a 4/4 and survive the turn. But he's triggering the Voice at that point.
Oh, okay.
So I don't think that's... Yes, that allows him to survive Advent, but I don't believe that's a winning play against an Advent long term.
Well, the draw of this turn for Chris VanMeter was a pretty good one. It was Domri Rad. He played it, and immediately Pelucranos got into a fight with that Sunblade Elf. Now it's a creature apiece. Chris is at 5, but he still is in the spot where he's not necessarily taking any damage on these attacks. Malafarina adds Smiter, but does not have any damage for him.
But there's just so many dangerous draws in David's deck at this point. Advent, another Ajani.
All right, Chris's draw was land 5. That land 5 was Stomping Ground, so I'm not really certain Chris can put that into play untapped anymore. He's going to plus his Domri. He draws him a second copy of Polukranos, though. To be honest, it's fair to say that cards, it's not really how many cards Chris can have, it's whether or not he can cast them all before the game's over.
He's got 6 cards in hand. He's up quite a bit. David's out of resources, but Chris is not out of the woods just yet.
He needs to stay alive long enough to play all these things in his hand. Looks like a pair of Storm Breaths. Can Chris afford here to shock for Storm Breath Dragon? A pro-white creature seems like it'd be real sweet on this board.
The thing is, if he's planning on playing defense anyway, I would just do this.
Which was tap land, Core Clan Rampager.
Yeah.
4-4 and 5-5 on VanMeter's side.
This play means, for example, the way that Chris has played it, he's still fine against Selesnya Charm.
Yep.
But if he takes the 2 damage and plays a Stormbreath Dragon, he dies to Selesnya Charm.
Malafarina has had a few turns here to draw one of these key cards, be it a Banishing Light, or a Selesnya Charm, or an Ajani Caller of the Pride, or an Advent, but it doesn't look like he has. And he just that turn drew, played a land, and passed. It's now letting Chris untap with 5 mana. This could be it. This could be what Chris needs to stabilize. Suddenly he can be once he gets to be +1 creature on the board, I really like Chris's chances. See there's Stormbreath Dragon, the play that cuts off almost all of the lines we mentioned.
Now he can start fighting with the Stormbreath Dragon, which is very powerful.
Yeah, Stormbreath will fight Smiter. Remember, it's pro-white, so it just wins the fight. 3 creatures to 1. Malafarina is going to have to be creative to get those last points across.
And again, Chris showing a lot of respect here, leaving his flyer back on defense so Ajani doesn't kill him.
Did get to swing with Polukranos that turn that put Malafarina down to 12. It means that next turn, he can start swinging what would be a lethal attack if he wants to. We see more lands for Malafarina. That is land 8. It's far too many for his deck. Without Mana Sinks, he doesn't have anything great to do with it. And Chris could go for the kill here with another Stormbreath Dragon. I don't think he will. But I believe he has a kill this turn if he decided to try for it.
No reason to get greedy this turn, as you can just win the game next turn.
The Stormbreaths, yeah. You can just win the game you can swing Polukranos or swing Gore Clan and then win with some Stormbreaths in the air next turn. It's pretty safe, especially if you draw land 7. You can just Monstrosity one of them.
Yeah, this turn he can go attack you with Stormbreath Dragon, leave a Stormbreath Dragon back on defense. That puts David at exact 0 the following turn, and nothing can really go wrong. I would guess Advent into Ajani would still kill him, but I don't know if there's any way for Chris to beat that.
Absolutely. So we will watch here. This seems like we may see Chris VanMeter. And we're still chasing that open win. Can he make it into the semis? I think the answer is yes. I think he has weathered the storm, but this was not an easy matchup by any stretch.
No.
There were a lot of turns where he was dead to about 10 cards in David's deck. Both games 2 and 3.
Yeah. I think Chris is mulling over a couple attacks here.
Just going to go for the kill. He could get punished here. And David taps him and says, meh, does he have the Selesnya Charm? No, he has a 9th land in his hand, his Mana Confluence. And there you have it, Chris VanMeter and Jund Monsters now 2 wins away from that championship that he has been chasing for so long.
So there's a couple different lines of play available to Chris on that turn. For example, something, I don't know if this play is necessarily correct, but something that he can do is say, attack with the Rampager and the Polukranos. Leave the Stormbreath Dragon back on defense.